Hello, and you're very, very welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. Today we're talking about HR and managing our business during very challenging times. As we head to level 5, a lot of our businesses sadly are closing. We're having to readapt. We're moving staff to remote to working from home again. How do we manage those staff? How do we look after those staff? God, can we even afford to keep those staff on? That is what we're going to be discussing today. So we're talking about HR. We're also going to be talking about a very, very cool challenge or competition that's taking place that may interest a lot of you guys. It's a challenge called the Irish Business Design Challenge. And we're going to be talking about how your business could potentially win €15,000 for that particular challenge. At the end of the day, what business wouldn't be interested in €15,000? So let's get today's show started.
Your local enterprise office, helping your business respond.
So I think it's time to meet some of our guests today, isn't it? So first up, I want to introduce you guys to, live from the green room, Caroline. Caroline is the managing director of the HR Suite, and quite frankly, was our first ever Lunch and Learn guest. You were, Caroline. Caroline's helped literally hundreds, actually thousands of Irish businesses since the beginning of COVID-19 when it comes to HR consultancy, support and advice. And quite frankly, every time I turn on the radio, the HR expert that I'm listening to is Caroline. So you're very, very welcome. Can't wait for your advice today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a kind of a roller coaster, hasn't it, since we did our first one back in March, I think. A lot has changed and happened since then, and there's been a lot of challenges presented to businesses, which they've really navigated really, really well, both very stressful, challenging challenges at the same time.
100%. Our next guest is the amazing Helen Dooley. Hello, Helen.
Hi, Greg.
Helen is the Director of Sales and Marketing at CR Payroll. And today she's going to be talking about how CR Payroll have adapted with COVID-19. They've even recruited staff, how that came about, how that process was. So really, really looking forward to hearing your story a little bit later, Helen. So you're welcome.
Brilliant. Thanks, Greg.
And then last, but certainly not least, we should really have a drum roll. We have the amazing Fiona Deegan, smiling, who's the head of enterprise at the local enterprise office in Kilkenny. And Fiona today is going to be talking about some local enterprise office supports that, quite frankly, if your business is, your bricks and mortar business is closed, maybe have time to seize upon supports that you didn't have time for before. So Fiona is going to be telling all a little bit later. So everyone, you're really, really welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Just to remind everyone that's watching, if you have any questions or queries today, I'll just literally remind you at the bottom, drop those questions or queries into the comments box, and we'll do our very best to answer as many of those questions throughout the show. I want to kick things off by asking Fiona. I'm going to wave goodbye to Caroline for a moment. I'm going to wave goodbye to Helen for a moment. And I want to talk to Fiona. So Fiona, there's a competition called the Irish Business Design Challenge. What is the Irish Business Design Challenge, and why should listeners care about it?
Well, Greg, the Irish Business Design Challenge, it's an initiative of the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, but it's in association with the local enterprise offices, Enterprise Ireland, and supported by the Department of Business Enterprise Innovation. And basically, we're inviting all businesses from all sectors. So we're not focusing on the design and craft sector, and I really want to make that clear here today. This challenge is for all businesses to share challenges that they have experienced throughout COVID and what they've done and what solutions they have designed to resolve those challenges. And it's open to all size businesses. It's open to micro enterprises, so that's up to 10 employees. There's 3 categories: micro, small, and medium. And so we're looking for entries from under all those categories. And really what we're looking for is businesses that have taken a number of actions really throughout COVID. They have pivoted their businesses, they've repurposed and redesigned their product and their service. Also discovered, identified how the solution impacts on current business process and operations of their business, and demonstrate how the solution impacts their future business and resilience, and has created efficiencies, I suppose, within their business. And we're also looking for businesses that have developed solutions that have a wider impact and a benefit for their business, but maybe for the wider community. And maybe just to give you an example of a business that has entered the competition, I might give you two examples, and they're both Kilkenny examples. So we'll take the first one, which is CF Pharma Ireland. They're based here in Kilkenny. Now, prior to COVID, they manufacture and sell medical devices and topical healthcare products. But they immediately, at the beginning of COVID, identified a need for a multi-use product, really, that would be safe in a variety of settings. So they developed the product CleanRight, and it's been approved by the Department of Agriculture and the US Environmental Protection Agency for use against COVID. So it's really perfect product for schools, allaying any of those concerns that parents might have about alcohol-based products being used by children, or potential abuse, or even flammability. And, they were successful since COVID in securing a place on the Department of Education PPE rollout for all schools. And they're predicting sales growth of 60% in 2019, and they've hired an additional 10 staff, and also have been granted planning permission to double the space of their premises. So that's a huge pivot within their business. But if I can give you an example of maybe a smaller business here based in Castlecomer in Kilkenny, then it would be Intersport, who would, prior to COVID, have been manufacturing sports jerseys for supply to the various clubs throughout the country. So they pivoted their business to manufacture PPE clothing. So that's just an example of the types of applications that we would be looking at. So as you said there earlier, Greg, it's prize fund of 50,000. Well, it's 51,000 to be exact.
Okay.
So for the winner of each category, there's 15,000, and for the runner-up of each category, basically, there's 2,000 euro. So currently, there's 260 applications in the system, and if you are one of those applications and haven't completed your application, 70% are yet not fully complete, so 30% complete. We would encourage you to complete those applications, because what's happening at the moment is there's an internal jury who are actually adjudicating and shortlisting those businesses. Now, the final applicants will be judged by an external panel made up of department officials, Enterprise Ireland, Local Enterprise Office, Design and Crafts Council, and the Irish Design Institute. And the applications will be scored on three items: innovation, impact, and resilience. But if your application is not complete, you will not be able to avail of the opportunity to have your business recognised as a hero business. And what that means is you will get, you'll be profiled in the media and across social media. You'll see profiles over the last number of weeks in the Independent. Actually, CF Pharma are featured in the business section of the Irish Independent today. So a great opportunity for promotion for your business. So we would encourage you to get your application complete if you're one of the 260 that don't have your application complete. If you are a business who haven't heard of this before or are thinking about applying, I suppose I'm delighted to announce today that the deadline for receipt of applications has been extended. It was to close on the 28th of October, and we are now extending the deadline to the 14th or the 13th of November. Yeah, the 13th of November. So again, I'd encourage you to have a look at it. Cash flow is a major issue within businesses at the moment. This is an opportunity to get both publicity for your business in national media and social media, and also an opportunity to avail of some funding. So I'd encourage you to have a look. The easiest way to find this is to Google the Irish Business Design Challenge, or else visit dcci.ie. It's the quickest way to get into it. So
Super
competition, Greg.
Superb. Now, just so the guys listening here, I'll just put the website up. Very, very simple, as Fiona said. So it's dcci.ie/rs-business-design-challenge. So it's simple enough. So that's that. So if you go to dcci.ie, you'll find details there, and then this is another website there as well for entering, which is ibdc.awardstage.com. So those are two websites to check out. So just to reiterate, this is not a craft competition. It's nothing to do with whether your business is into design. This applies to most businesses. It's open to all size businesses across all sectors that have, I suppose, had to pivot, adapt, redesign an existing product or service in response to COVID. And let's be honest, most of us have had to do that to some extent. It's free of charge to enter. So if you're not in, you can't win, but it's going to cost you nothing to enter. So bear that in mind. And just to be aware that if you are entering, obviously you've got November the 13th, but get your entry in early and put a bit of effort into it. So throwing in an application is unlikely going to get you the €15,000 prize. So make sure you put effort into your entrance. So best of luck with that. Fiona, thanks so much for telling us about the competition. Looks really, really interesting.
Great, looking forward to entries. And really, if you just go to dcci.ie, it'll pop straight up in front of you and just take you through to the award stage website.
Super. We'll talk to you a little bit later about some of the local enterprise office supports. Thanks a million. Now, I want to bring in Caroline. So now let's get down to the nuts and bolts of today. Let's talk about HR. Let's talk about how businesses are having to adapt, what we need to be doing. And as ever, don't be shy in getting those questions in. My first question for you, though, Caroline, is tell me about the HR suite. So the HR suite, your company, what exactly it is and how does it help small or any Irish businesses at the moment?
So I suppose we're a well-established HR consultancy with offices in Dublin and in Kerry and locations nationwide as well. And we have been working with companies in relation to pivoting. We got some brilliant examples there from Fiona of businesses that are upscaling. They're potentially changing what specific departments do. Other companies have had to close, unfortunately, both the last time and now again this time. So helping them put people on layoff, consider using this time if they're on the different schemes to upskill and to train, and to actually use this time to review their contracts, their handbooks, their policies, and get lots of good stuff done as well as training. The other, I suppose, key things we've been doing is helping organisations to transfer to remote working. So, for example, upskilling managers on the difference now involved in managing people remotely, which before they wouldn't have been maybe used to. And again, it's back to maximising productivity and helping people's mental health as well, because we're very conscious of the challenges around morale and culture, you know, with people working remotely. And I suppose the other key areas we've been helping people with is we do a lot of workplace investigations, we do a lot of training, like HR and business as usual is still continuing for a lot of businesses. So we're helping them do remotely facilitated investigations and training, and as I said, the whole restructuring, reorganizational design, remote working and culture. They're probably the top themes that are coming through from businesses at the moment.
Okay. Fascinating. So very, very generic question, but to start us off, we're moving to level 5, or we have moved to level 5, or some version of level 5. What do businesses really need to do now? So what's the kind of checklist? What do we need to do now that we've moved to level 5 from an HR perspective?
Okay, so I suppose a lot of businesses would have been very proactive at communicating with their staff right throughout COVID. And the communication takes a number of different forms. I suppose ensuring you have a COVID policy is really important, because for some employees that are essential workers, they're still working at the moment. For example, retail, pharmacy, there's lots of businesses still operating in that way. We also have a lot of employees who are working remotely. So I would say make sure you communicate your updated COVID policy that now is requiring updating in light of level 5. Because what that means is everybody's clear in relation to expectation, everybody's clear in relation to obligation in terms of entitlements, etc. So there's no ambiguity. The second piece around communication is, even if you've no update and you're closing now for the next number of weeks, communicate with people, even in the absence of updates, to do check-ins, because we definitely have a lot of stressed and worried people at the moment. And from a culture and a morale perspective, the old adage that people will forget what you say, but they won't forget how you make them feel. And at the minute, leaders who are proactive at communicating, positively and giving people the heads up, and managers who are checking in with their team and both giving them clear communication and also checking in on their well-being, I think is really important. I suppose they're probably the priorities. And then depending on your scenario, you're assisting people be clear in relation to entitlements and obligations. So for example, if you're closed, you'll be letting people know whether they're going to go on the PUP payment or they're going to go on one of the wage subsidy schemes that are available. So again, for organizations, they're tailoring the response then to suit. Remote working is a big thing, Greg, as we expected back in March when we spoke last. And we initially expected, obviously, remote working to be short-term, depending, because a lot of people miss the office. People ideally want the blended approach of a mix of both, so that they have the sociability and the collaboration, etc. So I think getting remote working now to be really working well for both managers and for employees is a big responsibility, and how we do that positively so that we maximize productivity and we allay people's mental health concerns and worries around it as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So you mentioned. So how is the employment wage subsidy scheme and PUP? How's it changing as a result of moving to level 5?
So I suppose the positive thing is the government have reversed the decision to decrease it to €300. So it's gone back up to 350. Again, it's depending on what people are earning. It's important, I suppose, the organisation decide, are they going to go and use the wage subsidy if they meet the criteria for it, or are they going to go down the road of putting people on the pandemic unemployment support? So different organisations are making different decisions in light of their business requirements. I suppose we are all hoping that this is short term, and it's important that organisations make the right decisions around restructuring and reorganisational design. And one really important thing to remember is you need to be able to objectively justify your criteria. So I'll give you an example. So say you own a restaurant and the restaurant is closing, but you're still going to do takeaway. So you may need some staff to manage the phones, some staff to manage the orders, and some staff in the kitchen, but you need less staff than you would ordinarily have if you were open. So you need to show objectively how you've selected those staff members. So again, just keep a record of that and make sure you've done that based on fair, objectively justified criteria. Some employers are also considering, will they do a team A and a team B, and they're rotating people. I think it's collaboratively working with the team to see what works best for everybody. But there's lots of supports available. We wish we weren't in this situation, but it's brilliant that the supports are there, notwithstanding that.
Yeah. something you did a lot of work on back in April, I think it was you developed an HR guide with Enterprise Ireland. And I suppose for businesses, having a guide or something to work off can be particularly useful. I'm going to put a link to your guide up on the screen for anyone that wants to look at it. But tell us a little bit about the HR guide that you developed.
So I suppose to be fair to Enterprise Ireland, they wanted kind of a one-stop shop that people would go to get information in relation to all things COVID related. So a number of the things we're talking about today would have been covered off in that guide, including, helping you draft your initial COVID policy, etc. Obviously, a lot has changed since April, but it's still a very relevant guide in terms of the basic principles. And I think now what we're realizing as well is, at the start, it was panic stations, whereas now we need to kind of take stock to kind of make sure we're doing the right thing. So I'll give you an example. So for example, if you have remote workers at this stage, you would be expected that you have a remote working policy, that you've considered the ergonomic elements associated with somebody working from home, especially seeing as it's going on now, and it will go on long into the next year. So again, those kind of proactive things, that sometimes it's really good to press pause and to actually assess, okay, am I actually doing all the right things? And that guide was developed keeping in mind the fact that a lot, if not most, small to medium-sized enterprises don't have a HR function. So they would contact us or look for advice to say, look, what do I need? What are the basics that I need? And that guide gives you those basics. And then if you have a more complex query, so for example, you might have somebody who has a vulnerable, underlying health condition, or they might have a vulnerable adult living with them at home and they're concerned and you're not sure how to deal with it, you might get further expert advice from us, but at least it gives you the basics in relation to the generic pieces of information that you need, because employment law is tricky at times, especially we don't know what we don't know sometimes, and like we always say, it's great to be able to focus on what you're amazing at in your day job and in your business, and then dip in and out of the expert advice as needed outside of that.
Yeah, no, fantastic. It's just like, I think we need guidance. So I think we need a template that at least we can work off to know that we've got the right things in place. And that's particularly useful. Loads of questions coming in. So here's one that's very common at the moment, because I think we're all tired of COVID. Hand up who's tired of this. I'm sick of it at this stage. So question is, how do I deal with apathy amongst my staff members? Like at the end of the day, we opened, we put huge amount of effort to open. Now we're back to not working in the office, we're working remotely. How do we deal with apathy?
I think what's really important is psychic management doesn't work. And the way we sometimes presume and expect people to all, be developing their own resilience or, working hard at, the culture of the organization or the focus, etc. I think it's really important that person who's been listening today has named it and identified it. I think that's something that most businesses would agree with and say, well, me too, actually, I have that same problem. So again, I mentioned, the importance of doing training and reinforcement with your staff now. So again, that's, I suppose, really important to kind of, embrace that. So I would suggest that you're considering what business type you have first of all, and then consider what type of training might be suitable for you, like SkillsNet, and there's loads of other bodies out there to support the cost of training. So if it was me, I would talk to that person to identify what would really make a difference. So there might be some training in relation to building resilience. Like we know that doing good basics and having good habits will help our resilience and help our well-being. But sometimes we forget those good habits and need to be reminded of them. And sometimes as well, we need to consider in the working environment and in the day, what additional measures we can put in place as employers to help our employees in that regard. So again, doing the Zoom coffee break if people are all working remotely. I know one of the girls in our office, she's brilliant at doing catchphrases, and again, it's a distraction. It's something a bit different. It's a bit fun. We've done yoga sessions, we've done different things, encourage people to get fresh air. One of the girls did, a 5K, and we were all, cheering her on. So I think there's light social things we can consider. I think we need to upskill our managers because they're dealing with different challenges now, and we're dealing with a lot of overflow, as we always have in HR, between personal life and work. They have to overflow. We're dealing with humans.
Yeah.
And I would say then work with your team to identify what training we can do with them about building resilience, assisting with culture and assisting with well-being. And rather than just think about it, I'd actively do specific steps, because I think by naming it and addressing it, I think that in itself is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. Such important points. I think you hit a nail on the head. I think a lot of businesses don't get this. When we start working remotely, we leave our staff alone. We maybe send them an email. We're not talking to them. If we were in the office, we may be talking to them 2 or 3 times an hour. How are you getting on there, Deirdre? Or how was your night out? I know that's not a good thing at the moment. There's no nights out, but how was your walk? But the reality is that human kind of contact is missing, and then we feel isolated. So I love the idea of even your Zoom coffee breaks and so on. Another question that came in was, and again, this big question, what tools are good for managing staff remotely?
So there's lots of good technology platforms. Again, depending on the specific business that you have, there's lots of opportunities to explore ones that work best for you. But I think the best tools you can give people who are working remotely is to help them become better time managers of their time in the light of all the distractions that are going on. And I think time management training and skills at the minute has never been more important. So I would suggest things like a default diary, so people plan their week ahead, focus on prioritizing work, allocating specific amounts of time, turning off your email pop-up, for example, so that you're not going to be distracted. Eat the frog, do the hardest task that you dread most first thing. So start, I suppose, implementing good habits, because the technology will support and complement what you're doing, but that's all that will do. So I would definitely suggest complementing whatever technology you end up using with a really good time management, I suppose, techniques and principles. The other key piece of advice I would give to complement that is that the people manager of individuals should be doing a weekly task meeting or a weekly check-in with everybody, because you mentioned, Greg, the isolation and the challenge around that. So I think it would be really good to make sure that you're doing that task meeting, because that's the opportunity to kind of go, look, Greg, how's everything going? How are you getting on? How's everything going? But it's also the opportunity for me to say, well, Greg, actually, I'm stuck on this project. I'm actually not quite sure. Because as you said, when I was in the office, I was able to just go up to you and ask, which I can't do now. And the other piece I would say is just, we're talking about remote workers, but remember, a lot of people haven't the right setup to be good remote workers. So I think we really need to look at people who are sitting on the bed still, people who are working out of a bed set. They haven't got the confidentiality, the GDPR, the technology, the space, the ergonomic setup. So I think we need to do a review of, is it working? Because it's gone on a long time, it's going to go on a long time to come. So we need to kind of do a check-in with people to say, how is remote working going for you? How can I support you more as an organization or as a manager to make this work better? How are you set up? So I think it's good timing. And as always, I'm going to say, update your policy. Like the policies in HR, if it's not in paper, it never happened. And it's a really good time to review all of those. So they would be my top tips, Greg.
No, that's great. That leads into another question here. So someone's saying their staff are not very tech savvy. I appreciate this one. And they're resistant to change. And I think a lot of us are resistant to change. We're very stressed. What are my responsibilities? Can I force them to use technology that they say they're not comfortable with? And should I be providing them with training?
Okay, so I think that's a challenge that many of us have encountered. I mean, we have never, any of us, I think, been on as many Zoom calls, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and to mention but a few. But I think we've realized as well how simple they are once you get comfortable with them. And I think our job as managers and employers is to help people, you know, manage the change, because we know change is the most, we've never had as much change ever, I would say, as we do now. And embracing that change is key to our survival, key to productivity, etc. So I would say I would definitely consider training. There's great things now in terms of screen shares, in terms of, you know, how you would do the training. But also, I think sometimes if it's showing someone how to do the tech, you might send them, you know, screenshots of it, and, you know, they have that to look at so that they can have a little look themselves. But then somebody talks them through it, and maybe then they get a buddy, and the buddy talks them through it again. And rather than getting into breakout rooms and all the cool stuff, we're just using it very basically to start. And I think, you know, we have no choice but to embrace the change, but it's how we do it. And I think if we make it, I suppose, as comfortable as we can for people, we're bringing them on that journey with us, because it's not fair to people to feel that they're out of their depth. And I think a lot of people have done, you know, and it's our obligation, I would say, to help them on that journey of getting more comfortable with it, so that it's not something that they fear, because there's people have a lot of anxiety at the minute. We don't want to be adding more anxiety in relation to tools they're using at work. So I'd really work with them. And the first starting place is I just start the question to say, listen, how can I help you? So what can I do to support you get more comfortable with the technology? You tell me, and let's start from there, and be patient with it. And I think you'd be surprised how far we've come.
Great advice. I think I love the advice of really trying to keep it simple. So I think there's so many cool technology that we can throw at staff that's going to overwhelm them. And again, if they can just use it, if they can use Zoom and have a face-to-face conversation, albeit a virtual one, that's a great starting point. So maybe not overwhelm staff with too much technology too soon. I love that. Love that advice. That's really good. There's another question in, which is a very tough one, and I'm sure some of us have this problem. Someone says, you know, I'm going to have to let staff go. How do I break them? How do I break the bad news to them? And what options are going to be available to them? So people obviously really worried about their loyal staff that they can genuinely no longer afford to keep on the payroll.
Okay, so obviously I would say, first of all, tread softly. You know, we're dealing with people, and, you know, there's lots of stress and anxiety at the minute, so just tread softly. The second thing I would say is make sure you're very clear on your legal obligations, because if you choose somebody unfairly, you could end up in an unfair dismissals case, etc. So press pause is my first piece of advice, and identify what is the end result you need to achieve. So for example, it might be to save €50,000, for example. Let's just go with that. So then first thing I would say is there any other way around it rather than actually letting somebody go? What if you put a number of staff on a 3-day week, which is short time, so everybody gets to keep their job? Would that be a better option? What if you did job sharing week on, week off, which a lot of people are considering due to COVID, in line with business continuity? So we'd explore all the other avenues. So then the next option is layoff, and layoff means you're pausing their contract of employment. So you're saying, look, Helen, I don't have work for you from now until the 1st of December, and I'll be reviewing things again the end of November, but at the moment I've no work for you. So that's a pausing of the contract, which is called short time in terms of layoff. So we've covered short time, where you're reducing their hours or doing every second week. We've covered layoff, which is pausing their contract. And only then, when you've considered all of those, would you consider redundancy, which is terminating their employment because you have no work available. And termination is really important you do it correctly for the reasons I've outlined, but also it's important you ensure you've objectively justified grounds as to how you do it, which means that if you're closing the entire business, everybody's impacted the same way. They're entitled to a redundancy payment, they're entitled to notice, etc. If it's a case that you are if you're keeping some parts of the business opened with some jobs, because it's never the person, it's always the role we make redundant. So if certain jobs are going to be made redundant, then you're going to make sure you're objectively justifying why you've chosen those jobs. You're consulting with your employees and you're keeping your paper trail to make sure that you can stand over that. So I would say press pause, make sure you know the steps you need to follow, get advice if you need it, and make sure you do it with empathy and make sure you engage with staff. And I think we're finding that staff are very aware and are preempting what's happening. So communicating with them proactively is really important. Sorry, Greg, you're on mute.
There you go. Aren't you clever? There you go. I was on a roll. I was just saying, on from that, someone is saying that they're going to be letting staff go, but ironically, they're also going to be recruiting. And what they're saying is, the skill set of the person that they now need is very different from the one that they had. And they're very worried about this on the grounds that the staff that's going to be let go are going to be really angry seeing them recruiting staff. What's your advice? Is it better to try and upskill existing staff? What's your advice for that?
I think it depends on what the new skills you require are. Like if you can upskill staff, you're obliged to do so. Like redundancy is the last resort and you should try and do everything you can to avoid the redundancy occurring. So if it's the case you can redeploy people into other departments or you can upskill them, you're obliged to do so. If it's a case that the business is pivoting and diversifying dramatically, and for example, you need bio people now, or you need engineers, or you need a different skill set to what you had before, and a qualification is required, etc., I would name it, I would tell people. So I would be really open with people to let them know, look, Caroline, you worked in this area, the business now is moving in this direction because the customers are not buying from that area anymore. We have to downsize here and we're upsizing here. But I'd tell them that. So you're able to have the conversation and the debate and the discussion and the consultation with them rather than them thinking it and we not addressing it. So again, back to the psychic management piece, I always think it's way better if you name it and you have the conversation so both parties are clear, and then always do a quick email afterwards to say, dear Greg, following on from the chat, we discussed and agreed the following, so that the paper trail is there. Because again, in HR, if you've no paper trail, it never happens. So that's the concept you have to think about. So because the burden of proof is always on the employer, except constructive dismissal. So it's really important just to be very aware of the paper trail, but engage, consult, and involve.
Yeah, great point, because we can't get away with saying, well, but I told you on a Zoom call. So you're absolutely right. We need to get in the habit. For some of us, particularly some retail stores, we possibly don't do paper trail very well. So really good advice. Someone also mentions here, from an HR perspective, obviously we need policies, we need guides, we need to tell the employer what's expected from them working from home. But what this person wants to know is, what do I need to do for them? So say, for example, I have staff that don't have a computer to work from at home, or they don't have proper broadband to access from home. Whose responsibility is that?
Okay, great question, Greg. So again, I think this is very much reflective of the fact that the last remote working happened in, an emergency situation, and it wasn't something that was preempted or planned. So as a result, we're now in the situation to go, God, this is going to continue longer. So we're pressing pause and reassessing it. So there's a few obligations. One is you need to provide the tools the person needs to do the job. So that involves the technology, the laptop, etc. And the second thing is a safe place of work. So that's why we need to check ergonomically that the person has a suitable desk, a suitable chair, etc. And again, we do that in consultation with the employee. And I suppose that's something now that we're remedying. IKEA, I'd say, has never sold as many standing desks, and other local suppliers are out of stock, also to do with desks, I'm hearing right around the country, because the amount of people that have literally gone to remote working. So again, you have an obligation to ensure the person has the tools to do the job. There's challenges. Broadband is an issue in many places. Broadband is an issue because of the amount of people in rural Ireland and right beyond that are now working from home. So there's definite challenges, but again, having empathy and understanding in relation to those challenges and working as much as you can to try and remedy those. But again, I think the way of working, the other important point, Greg, is the right to disconnect. So people have still the opportunity. We should be ensuring and encouraging people to take their breaks and ensuring people have the opportunity to disconnect, because we don't want somebody, just because they're at home now and the laptop is more accessible maybe, that they're expected to answer an email at 11 o'clock at night. It's in breach of the Organisational Working Time Act, but it also means they're not going to be productive. Like, we know that people will be way more productive if we give them their appropriate breaks. An emergency is always fine. You know, ringing somebody to say, look, I can't find the password, or I really need you to do this for a customer once in a blue moon. An exception is always an exception and it's always fine. But when it becomes the norm that you're noticing your team are sending emails way outside their work hours and it becomes more normal, I think then you need to start addressing that. And that's why the weekly task meeting that we mentioned is so good for having those types of conversations. Obviously, you can pick up the phone and nip at things in the bud, but again, you can just check in to make sure that their working hours and their work-life balance is working well. Because again, you know, the whole mental health piece now, encouraging people to get fresh air, eat well, drink, you know, lots of water, you know, do all those good habits has probably never been more important, because for a lot of people, going to work, they walked or they cycled, or, you know, there was a lot more maybe interaction with people, so that social piece, etc., etc. So again, we're encouraging that to complement the remote working now.
Yeah, great advice. So good ideas. You know, before you start work, go out for a 15 or 20-minute walk before you enter your kitchen or wherever your dedicated workspace is now. Great advice. Just thinking back to the budget that was announced last week. The budget. Were there any things? So with what was announced last week, were there important HR implications out of last week's budget that we should address or be aware of?
I suppose the few key headlines is the retirement age isn't changing. And remember, we've no statutory retirement age, it's the pension age. But that obviously influences people's decision in terms of retirement. And again, we always have to ensure you have a retirement policy. And again, you consider retirement as one of the key grounds around equality, which often comes up as a real issue for companies and for individuals. The other, I suppose, thing just before the budget is the government approved the Low Pay Commission's recommendation in relation to increasing the minimum wage by 1%, which is effective from the 1st of January. I suppose the other key thing is it was supporting the whole remote working, and it added broadband as one of the potential expenses that people can get tax exemptions, and benefit in kind, you know, is exempt in that regard. So they're probably the key things. We actually have a download available on our website in relation to the budget. If anybody is interested in getting more details on any of that, we'd be delighted for people to go to the HR Suite website and download that.
Super. Brilliant. We're going to bring Helen in now in a sec, but two very quick questions in. Someone was asking, managing attendance when staff are working remotely, is there any particular method or tool that's good for doing that?
Again, I would say for me, I don't mind what tool or system you use. It depends on what works well. Rather than an additional one, you try and have something really straightforward. I think it's more ensuring people are taking their breaks. Obviously, there's an obligation on employers to keep records to ensure people are taking their breaks. And again, that's more challenging now because, you know, we have to operate in a system of trust with our employees, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything. So again, I suppose, you know, encouraging them to take the breaks, encouraging the right to disconnect would be my biggest tips around that. In terms of the systems, as I say, there's loads out there. Happy to talk to anybody about their specific needs and which one I think would maybe work best for them if they want to get in touch directly. But I think your obligation, remember, about working time still stands when people are working remotely. So important to bear that in mind.
Yeah, great advice. That's fantastic. And then just to wrap up with the question, just to kind of highlight some of the key points. So from an HR perspective, what do I need to do differently now? So a couple of tips just to leave the viewers on as we head into level 5.
Okay, so I suppose I would say consider your business strategy. What is it you're doing? So if your business is closing for a number of weeks, if your business is pivoting, if your business is reinventing itself. Once you've identified what your business strategy is, the HR strategy will complement that. So we looked at potential, changes in terms of terms and conditions, hours of work. It might be short time, it might be layoff, it might be redundancy, and just tread carefully in relation to navigating those. The next top tip would be, if you are doing remote working, be sure to train your managers in terms of how to manage remote workers and the challenges and the changes around that. And for your remote workers, my top tip would be to consider time management training, and also combine that with mental health and well-being training as well, because it's a very different environment in relation to managing that, and also to do your risk assessment. And I suppose the other, overarching piece of advice, Greg, I'd give is to make sure you've updated your COVID policy, your working from home policy, and things like force majeure. Does it count? What about your absence policy? What to do in light of COVID? What's the story with your sick leave policy, etc.? So spend time reviewing your current policies and procedures to update them. And again, get advice from somebody like us if you need that fast tracked, or you need help in that regard. But it's really important that your policies reflect what you need to be doing and apply them consistently. And my final piece of advice is in relation to COVID cases. So just be very careful in how you manage people's personal sensitive medical data. We, at the early stages, there was a lot of panic, and a lot of, people were communicating to say, oh my God, Greg is going for a test, and the whole workplace knew it. So again, we need to be very careful in relation to how we manage people's data, and also do that very professionally, not alone from the staff member themselves, but for colleagues as well, because we don't want to deter somebody coming and telling us that they've been confirmed with coronavirus because they feel that we will handle it unprofessionally. So again, make sure your policy confirms what do you do if you've got symptoms, i.e. stay at home, what to do if you're a close contact, what to do if you're tested positive, etc. So give them proactive communication in advance so that they know. And I suppose remain calm and look after yourself too. I think we're always focusing on looking after everybody. I think it's really important we spend the next couple of weeks very focused at minding ourselves as well, because for business owners and managers, it's definitely uncharted waters, and it's important we just focus on that as well. So they would be my top tips, Greg.
There's a minefield on there as well, Caroline. That's brilliant. But that's a great one to leave on. Mind yourself. Look after yourself as a business owner. We have a lot of stuff on our shoulders at the moment. So look after yourselves. Caroline, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. You're a superstar. Now, I accuse her of being the smiliest person today, in fairness to Helen. There she is. I told you she was the smiliest person out there. So a big hello to you, Helen. So Helen, tell us about CR Payroll.
Well, Greg, first of all, thank you to Leo it's great to be able to return the support that Leo have given to us as a Kilkenny-based, I suppose, Southeast company with that UK and Ireland reach. Aileen and all the team, Fiona, have been phenomenal in the support that they've given us. And as we transition into EI, it's just, I would say to anybody out there that to reach out to Fiona and her team, just with regard to kind of any conversations that you want to have, because they are truly a great an alliance to have and support to have in your pocket. So CR Payroll was born out of a gap in the market for on-demand payroll professionals. Mairead Coughlin, our CEO, who was a director of outsourced servicing for payroll, saw the need for high caliber payroll professionals to be available for any planned or unplanned payroll emergencies. So essentially, our team become the backup to your existing payroll team. Now, what we were first to market with our contractual 2-hour SLA. You're showing our lovely website there. So we're guaranteeing that your payroll gets processed. So if that means if your payroll is in jeopardy, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, your payroll person hasn't rocked up for whatever reason it may be, we can remotely process your payroll for you from that point of failure, and we can ensure by 11 o'clock at the very latest that we are actually on, we switched in remotely, and that we are actually running your payroll. From a COVID perspective, and even pre-COVID, because this is our standard operating model. So when COVID came on board, we were very much kind of used to emergency situations, working remotely, and so on. So our clients typically, I suppose, from a COVID perspective, the reasons that they would engage us is for those situations where it's a planned it's illness, maternity cover, holiday cover, or unfortunately, which has become more common, is that unplanned illness. We have actually also had, just to put a positive spin on it, we have had a kind of a lotto-like win. We have had an employee who come into a significant amount of money and leave the business as well. So there are good stories, and I suppose slightly more negative ones then as well. We have 100% delivery on our service, and that is enabled truly by the phenomenal and empowered by our incredible payroll team that run all of the payrolls on that on-demand basis. So what they do is they step in and they take your payroll processes, they run your payroll processes on your existing platform, so there's no need for any technological change. And then from our clients' perspective, what they refer to us is for, I suppose, the high quality of our staff, and also our flexibility and our reliable approach to ensuring that their payroll is processed.
It's easily senior sales and marketing director. That's very impressive. So what does remote working look like for you guys, for CRP?
Okay. So as I said, our operating model pre-COVID was that we dealt with emergency situations on a remote basis. Now, COVID, so in that sense, COVID didn't present massive challenges to us in terms of working remotely. Some of our teams had actually been working remotely on an ad hoc basis anyway. As we are listed as an essential service, there is a need for us to be office-based from time to time also. But I think what is really, really important for employers out there is having the conversations with all of their employees to make sure that the fit that is in place for them is the correct fit. Now, there's, from way back in March, the situation has completely changed now. I think all companies are at that maturity level that they have adopted a certain amount of scenarios that are working, some aren't. But I suppose as we go into this another 6 week of that remote challenge again, it really is, it's echoing what Caroline said, and I was nodding away in the background the whole time that Caroline was speaking. So it's the correct equipment, it's getting the basics right, correct equipment, having that office set up so that it is correct, it's the ergonomics of it, but it's also having that workspace available for employees if they can in their own working environment at home, that if it can be solely for remote purposes. Now that could be so down to, like Caroline said, IKEA is getting, bombarded with the standing offices, but something as simple as just a room separator, you can buy locally, that it's just separating off that workspace for them. And that's what's been really important for our team. The pros and cons to the remote working: travel time. They're saving immediately on travel time. It's also a cash saving because they're not spending any more that money on fuel. Some of our employees as well, and some of our clients as well, have said that because they're not working in an open plan environment, they actually can concentrate a little bit easier and they can get a lot more work done, so they're a little bit more productive as well. Now, there's mixed, I think, feelings on the work-life balance. So some people truly enjoy going into that office and having that interaction, that social interaction. It's very important for them from a work-life balance perspective. Whereas you'd see certain people that would be, I suppose, it's better for them. They can get up, go for the walk in the morning, straight into work, and then they have that divide then as well. So I think it is quite mixed with regard to the work-life balance. But again, an overriding thing is that you have to be aware of is the isolation. So the isolation for employees, making sure that they are definitely connected into somebody within the workplace. Training as well, from when we're talking about the recruitment, the training can take a little bit longer because you would be doing it kind of on a remote perspective, and you're doing it through Zoom or through Teams or whatever technology that you do use. So it does take that a little bit longer. So you have to factor that into the onboarding times of any new recruits that you have, or existing staff as well. If you are upskilling existing staff, you can't expect people to be on a Zoom call or a Teams call for 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever the time may be. It's taking those little breaks in between. I think when you look at it from a technology perspective, what Caroline was saying as well was, it's technology shouldn't be the solution. You have to look at what the challenge is and incorporate technology into the solution. Don't expect a technology to come in and solve any of the challenges that you're having. It has to be overall part of the solution. When you're looking at upskilling as well, there was an interesting question with regard to upskilling your team. Most of the time when it comes to technology, it's fear-based. If you look at a child and you look at an adult and you're given exactly the same technology, the child has no fear. They just go in, they press buttons. So remove that fear by saying, it doesn't matter, you can't break it. You may end up not recording something that you made it to record, but you can't break it. It's essentially, most technology is unbreakable. So there's backups, there's things, if you delete something, there's backups and so on. So it's removing that fear as well, I think, for people as well, that needs to be done. And again, it's I suppose a lot of our clients as well, and the chatting with them, I think it's just going back to basics, checking in with employees, as Caroline said, having a one-to-one conversation with your employees. What worked in March and April may not still be working for them. Make sure that you are checking in on a regular basis. So it's, I suppose, stop, assess, change if required, but don't just change because you believe that we're in another challenging time and that we do need to change, I suppose, just for the sake of it.
Brilliant. And you said you've recruited this year. So how did you go about that process, and how's that work for you?
Well, it's a very different space to where we were this time last year. I was, in a couple of weeks' time now last year, I was talking to Fiona about the wonderful careers fair that she held in St. Mary's Cathedral in Kilkenny. And it was a beautiful, it was a wonderful career fair. It was amazing. And it was like, that I suppose that it's a completely different space now that we're in. From a recruitment perspective, though, as well, what I would say is it's stopping and looking at what is your typical, I suppose, pre-COVID recruitment process. Is there stuff that needs to change? Obviously, the face-to-face interaction isn't going to be allowed anymore, so you have to switch to technology. But is there anything else that essentially needs to change? Again, it's that whole thing of, if it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. So it's looking at something logically and saying, okay, so from this part of the on-site interview, we will have to change it to using technology. From an overall recruitment perspective, I suppose when you look at it in parts, like the number of applicants has actually dramatically increased. With that, you have to adjust to the time to actually filter through those CVs and see who is actually appropriate to bring forward for interview. But also, you're getting a great caliber of employees who are, I suppose, reassessing and seeing, is this what I want with their company, with their current company? It is very unfortunate that a lot of people have been put in a situation where they haven't had the choice, and they have been made redundant, and they are looking for something else. But there are definitely a lot more applicants actually coming through. I suppose as well, when you look at it from an applicant perspective, we've had our clients that unfortunately they've had people sign contracts to have a starting date and then renege on their contracts. So employees, I suppose, have more of a choice as well, as because there are companies like ourselves that are in the wonderful position that we are recruiting. Changes, I suppose, as well, is the handshake is gone. So it was a good indicator, and it was something that was seen as an important step for a candidate going to interview stage. It's gone, but I still think that you can get a sense on a digital platform with regard to kind of what the I suppose the person is like. We've seen an increase in referrals from internal employees. So they have actually started recommending kind of their own friends their own colleagues that would be in a position that are looking at changing as well. So that's quite a positive as well for us. I suppose we do miss the interaction with regard to kind of the face-to-face. But I think what's really important again is, and it's reiterating what Caroline said earlier, it's stop, assess, change if required. If no change is required, then just keep it simple and keep going forward with the processes that you have actually in place. Remember, we have a number of platforms to use. We have email, we have the mobile phone, we have our technology, you have your Teams, you have your Zoom and so on. You even have, if you need to, just the old-fashioned post, put the stamp on it. There's varying forms of communication that we can use, and it's looking at how appropriate they are for each stage of the recruitment process.
Brilliant. I like the point you're making is really to use technology, not make technology the center, but use technology to be as normal as you can, to replicate the real world as much as you can, and to keep things as simple as much as you can. Don't use it as an obstacle when it comes to you and your staff and and the recruitment process. Brilliant. I want to bring Fiona in here quickly, because my final question that I wanted to ask you is, what kind of supports have you guys availed of? I know you talk about Fiona's fantastic employment fair in the past. What supports have CR Payroll availed of, and what has been useful for you guys?
Well, we've availed of quite a number of supports from Leo. I think I suppose we've upgraded our website and so on as well, and from a recruitment perspective as well. I think overall it's the approach, that the consultancy that is available as well. So it's looking at sometimes what can be, you can look at what is available, not be quite sure as to, can I apply for that? Do I apply for that? What is the actual scenario? It's having the conversation with Fiona or Aileen and seeing, well, what is appropriate for your business? And they will actually have that quality conversation with you. Look at the consultancy if you need it. We had a great sessions with Rosemary and Aidan down and Bick in Waterford. It's starting the conversation. Start there and see what is actually available to you.
Brilliant.
And I can come in there, Greg, and agree totally with Helen. I would have met Helen at the Chamber Awards, I think this time last year.
Yes.
She was aware of the supports of the local enterprise office. And here we are today with the business ready to transition to Enterprise Ireland, having availed of business expansion grants towards salary cost, the trading online voucher, the business continuity voucher that was announced at the start of COVID, and availed of a range of mentoring for their marketing strategy, finance and social media. So she's a great example. The company is a great example of availing of the supports when they know that the local enterprise office is there.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Helen, thank you so much for your time. In fact, actually, we were talking about recruitment. I think Caroline had something that you obviously would be big on the recruitment piece as well. Was there anything you'd add, Caroline, to what Helen was saying as regards the recruitment and the recruitment process?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, like now it's probably a little bit more challenging because you're doing it online. So I think it's good to use as many additional tools as you can to help you. So one of those tools is OPQ's, Occupational Personality Assessments, because each tool gives you another layer of insight. And like, you really, if you're recruiting somebody, it's like you're investing whatever that salary is. So you're taking on somebody on 30,000. It's a big amount of money to spend and invest in this person. By the time you've them inducted and on board, you really want them to be the right person. So I would strongly advise considering things like OPQ tests. You can get people to do them online, and also making sure you have a couple of layers of interview. So if you're doing an initial interview, rather than tell me about yourself, that it's very much competency based, it's linked to the job, that you're very prepared to get the most out of the time you have with the candidate, and asking really great questions and maybe getting them to do something that's very relevant to the task. So for example, if you were recruiting somebody to be an amazing administrator, you might give them a typing test to do. And again, you can use the opportunity to kind of really get that right. And my final point would be do really good reference checks. The amount of clients that would often say to me, look, Caroline didn't work out, and I don't know, look, she's done. And I'd always say, and how are her references? And lots of times people come back to me and say, actually, do you know what? Such and such said she was fabulous, but they weren't referees who worked with her on a work capacity. So people could be fabulous individuals, but it's to see, are they the right fit for your culture, and are they the right fit for the job that they're actually applying for? So I would do kind of those additional maybe considerations just to think about that.
And on the OPQs, depending on which kind of a tool that you do actually go with, it's not just for the interview phase. A lot of them can be brought through the lifetime of the employee as well, so that it's used to see how they integrate with the team and how they grow within the business as well. So it's worthwhile investment.
Brilliant. Helen and Caroline, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the wonderful words of wisdom. I've got to kind of expand my business, so I need to recruit people now, because I've got some really, really good tips there. I wish both your businesses continued success, and I want to give the floor now as we wrap up today's session to Fiona. So Fiona, the floor is yours. So down below on the screen, we have localenterprise.ie/response, which is again the link that you guys can go to find out about all the local enterprise office supports available to you. But we've been talking about HR a lot today. What kind of supports out there do you think are really important for companies, maybe at level 5 to consider?
Well, I suppose in relation to HR, Greg, I suppose my key message today would be to businesses who are maybe closed and have a little bit more time on their hand to invest that time in doing some training, upskilling their staff, upskilling themselves, participating on a range of webinars and training programs that we have available through all the local enterprise offices throughout the country. And if you visit the localenterpriseoffice.ie/response page and you scroll down, you can actually get a list of all the training programs that are available throughout the country on that page, which is a new facility on that page, and it's a great asset to have. But also, there's a lot of training programs such as employer advice and HR practices, doing business remotely, preparing HR practices for post-pandemic workplaces, leading your business through COVID, managing staff headcounts. There's any amount of training programs, Greg, available throughout the country. So literally contact whichever local enterprise board is running that training program. But each local enterprise office will have a similar offering. And I suppose when I'm looking at Caroline there today and I'm saying, wouldn't every business want a Caroline to get advice from? And that's possible, not to get Caroline exactly, but we have each local enterprise office has their own panel of HR experts that people can avail of. So what I would encourage people to do is pick up the phone, speak to our business advisors. They'll signpost you in whatever direction you need to go, whether it's revenue for financial supports that are available, employment scheme, wage subsidy schemes, whatever supports are available, we'll signpost you in the right direction. But also we'll work with you in terms of what your issue is within your business. We will appoint you and assign you an expert mentor who will work with you to sort out that issue and work through the problem with you. A most fantastic service. So to be able to avail of the skills and expertise of someone like Caroline, who can sit you down and advise you, because it's a very, very lonely place for somebody who's maybe self-employed and has a number of staff reliant on them. And it's really good to be able to share and bounce ideas off of and to get advice from experts in their particular field. So they're the key ones. The other support that, again, I would encourage, because we're back in lockdown again, is the trading online voucher scheme. I know in Kilkenny, since we started the scheme, we now have 453 businesses in Kilkenny alone, and that's replicated nationally. So those businesses now that are closed will be able to operate online and offer click and collect and buy online. And I suppose we're encouraging people to shop locally within their local area, rather than shopping where 70% of business is going out of the country. So again, asking people to see is there an opportunity within their business to trade online and look at that option?
Yeah, and we may have been busy trying to reopen our business and not got around to availing of the trading online voucher in the past. It's back, so quite frankly, now's the time to look into it. So no, that's a great piece of advice. And I suppose even with the mentoring, again, so busy trying to keep my business afloat, so busy trying to get ready to restart that maybe I didn't think I had the time to avail of the mentoring. This sadly, level 5 may be an opportunity when we have that time. So seize upon it. So I think a big point that one would always make is, first stop, if you're a business, is to contact your local enterprise office. 31 offices around the country, localenterprise.ie, find your local enterprise office and get in touch. That's your starting point. And I don't know what it's like down in Kilkenny, Fiona, but I know certainly the phones are ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing, and it can be very, very difficult, particularly with staff working remotely, to speak to everyone. So if it is busy and you don't get through, drop an email. Because I know you guys are extremely dedicated in ensuring that every inquiry and every email is responded to. So I think that's a very, very good point. So if you've been watching Lunch and Learns and you've been thinking about getting in touch, get in touch. That's your first point of contact. Brilliant. Super. So website www.localenterprise.ie/response. Check it out and seize upon the opportunities that are available to you during these very, very challenging times. Fiona, thank you so much for talking to us about not only the supports but the Irish Business Design Challenge as well. Really, really brilliant. And I'll just bring in everyone else just to say goodbye. So thank you so much to our guest today. You were absolutely brilliant. There was so much nodding going on in the green room, but I was worried some of you were going to get whiplash. But it's brilliant. I think you're the 3 smiliest faces we've ever had. Check out the Local Enterprise Office Facebook page for news on our next Lunch and Learn. We're finalising the details as we speak. And as I got 3 women here, it's important to say, hopefully a lot of the viewers watched NWED online, so our National Women's Enterprise Day event last week. If you didn't, or you want to watch some of the brilliant talks that took place at NWED this year, it's localenterprise.ie/NWED. Literally, the whole day is available in watch on demand rerun. So just down below you, www.localenterprise.ie/NWED. Some real gold there. So thank you so much, my brilliant guests. We'll see you very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
And thank you for everyone for tuning in. Brilliant. So all that's left for me to say is to say goodbye, and we'll see you in the next Lunch and Learn.
Your local enterprise office.